Hello and welcome to Afterbirth. I am your series host, Tracy Breathnach. And in this series, I'm going to be talking to a range of guests about this time, this thing that happens after birth. So there's a big lead up, the birth happens, it goes one way or another, and then what happens afterwards, be it the minutes, the hours, the days, the months, the years after a child has been born. I am a bit birth obsessed, and I have been exploring this topic around birth for the last 15 years since I first gave birth. It is a little bit of a self-obsession in one sense, because part of it has been about how to heal from the experience that probably blew my whole sense of identity and how I thought the world worked. It blew it open. And in the last 15 years, I have had such deep healing and opening and growth. And I want to find out more and share it with others. So I hope you listen. Please subscribe to the various channels, stay in touch via social media or via my website, www.tracybreathnach.com. So here we are at the beginning of Series 2, Episode 1, and I'm delighted to introduce you to my guest, Angharad Jenkins. Angharad is a songwriter, fiddle player, creative collaborator from Swansea, just down the road from where I live. She's enjoyed a 15-year career touring the world with the multi-award winning Welsh folk band Calan. But since becoming a mother, she's discovered her own voice, literally a singing voice, and now is writing kind of stories and words that she says need to be told. She describes her mission as a musician to connect with others, to open discussion and bring joy. And in this conversation, I was so excited. She was so excited. It's quite lively. I hope you enjoy. Angharad, I'm delighted you're here with me this morning, and we've just had a little chat to get ready for this chat. We don't really have a plan for this one. Sometimes when I come to podcasts, I've got some questions set up, but I think what's really inspired me to invite you to have a conversation or to speak with you about is your song, which you've just released last week. So we're recording this early June and you've just released Postpartum. You know, we can reflect on the lyrics of the song as we go, and I'm hoping we can also talk a little bit about the process and what your experience was. And you talk about on your Bandcamp page, you know, it's not all cute and fluffy, and it's time we open up about this, you know, the other side of becoming a mother, particularly those early weeks, months, when it's so intense physically, emotionally, mentally. The whole thing is just changing. And in particular, when you're describing the song, you talk about identity, you know, and the massive change in identity. So I'm hoping some of those themes will come through in the conversation. So welcome and thank you for being here with me.
Well, thank you for having me, Tracy. This is my first ever podcast as well, so it's fairly thrilling to be invited. And I listened to your first series, and it's the conversations you've been having with people is absolutely fascinating. And I've been referring other new mums to them. So what you're doing is great. So thank you for asking me to be involved.
Yeah, thank you. And it's something I think for me, since I became a mother, and it's often the way I think in life, it's only when I became a mother and had the experience, which I wasn't expecting, nobody had told me about, and I had to kind of work it all out in my own way. And for me, that really took me into the creative process. And I started making solo performances for the first time to try and understand my experience. That was it. How could art and creativity be a place where I could reflect my own experience back to myself, or something like that, and then share that with others and see where it resonates. So do you want to talk a little bit before we go into the song itself? You know, what is songwriting for you? What does that do for you in your experience when you come to writing songs that come from your experience of being a human being?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you said there that you started doing solo performances after becoming a mother for the first time. So my background, I've always played in bands. I've always been, my main instrument is the violin or the fiddle. I play a lot of traditional music, and I've always been very collaborative, but very much part of a team, part of a band. Now, I had my first baby in 2019. So she was 10 months when the lockdown came. So I had like another like external reason why I had to start thinking more individually, I suppose. Not only had I just had this massive life-changing experience of becoming a mother, but also it was during the pandemic as well. So I wasn't able to create in the usual ways that I did. But I found that the only way to communicate to the newborn baby was by singing. And now I was very much not a singer before having children. I very musical in school. I was always involved in the choir, but I had a very negative experience when I did one of my music exams, when you do the oral test and they play you a melody and you have to sing it back, and I was always quite anxious about singing anyway in public, and the examiner afterwards told me that was like a train crash. And so as a young teenager I was just like, right, that is it, I am never singing again. But I loved music, so I played music on my violin and the piano as well. And I always accompanied the choir in school, but I never sung. So I used to go on the school trips, but always accompanying on my violin, never ever singing. And I just believed in my head that I'm not a singer, but I like music, and I'll just make it in other ways through instrumental music. But of course that all changed when I became a mother, and I realised that the only way to soothe and to entertain my baby was not by singing, not by saying, stop crying, or are you okay? I just would sing and sing and sing, and it seemed to work. I was like, this is magic. This is like, wow, like it's that first form of communication, singing. And then I grew to realize, I was using my voice every single day to soothe and entertain my baby. And then a voice, of course, is just like another instrument. The more you use it, the more you practice it, the better it gets. And I noticed my range improving, my tone improving. I felt better because, you need to use your breath in a certain way to create that tone. I thought, I'm onto something. I've always wanted to be able to sing, but just thought I couldn't. So during lockdown, I was able to, I had a couple of singing lessons, just to set me right with, because breath work is like essential, isn't it? And it was all linking up inside me. The breathing techniques that I used for delivering my baby, I was learning again to sing, and it was all tying together. So once I'd got the voice, and I was getting a bit bored of singing the same old nursery rhymes that I'd been sung to, and everyone sings, I just started exploring words. And then suddenly I'd sort of tapped into something, and I was writing my own songs as a way to occupy myself more than anything, keep me entertained, because there was nothing, there were no groups, there was nothing during the lockdown. And expressing myself in that way just became a bit of an obsession. So I would, go on my daily walks, and I'd be singing to my baby, and people would be like looking at me like, who's that woman singing out loud, but every activity would have a theme tune. I'd be writing little ditties and little melody, we'd have the nappy changing theme tune, the going out theme tune, but then it became a bit more sophisticated, as I got into it. And then once I started, I couldn't stop. So I I wrote my first serious song in 2021 in January, and I couldn't stop then. Someone told me once that songwriting is like prizing open a rusty tap. Once you it's quite hard to open it, but once it's opened, the songs will start flowing. And that's just what happened. I wrote 17 songs, my whole album and more in 6 months. um, but it was such a cathartic experience, and I'm just glad I came to songwriting that way. It's a bit late on in life, I suppose, 35 to start it, but
yeah, I always think we find the thing we need when we need it, like the timing is right. And I also feel really strongly about this relationship and the gifts that our babies bring us, even in times when we might be experiencing pain and discomfort and exhaustion and all of those other things. But actually this relationship that appears when the baby comes to be sung to, like, mum, sing to me. I like that. So in some way, the baby unconsciously is inviting this singing from you, which is something that you've always wanted to connect to. I just love it. I love that relationship. And of course, there's loads of research, isn't there, about how babies' brains develop. Well, number one, with that attention, that kind of the vagus nerve, when we've got that face on face contact, eye contact, the voice, but even more so when it's musical, like that the neurons and our neurology just loves it. And I think it's up by the age of 2, we will have the most brain connections we will have in our entire life. And after that, then it starts pruning down based on which pathways we're using most. But that something about the singing just helps to open it all. So what a beautiful relationship. Like the baby is benefiting in the brain development, and you're developing this love for singing and getting your rusty cap open. It's great.
Yeah. I was really my midwife actually told me to start in that third trimester to listen to the same music every day as I prepared for birth. So set a time and listen to the same music, because the baby will hear and recognize that music and then continue to listen to it after they're born, and they'll associate that with calm and peace. And I thought that was such a lovely bit of advice from my midwife, because music played such a huge part in that, in the early days of my daughter's life. It was so calm and chilled in this house. It was just beautiful. I'm so fascinated at what point are we able to hear things from inside the womb, because they learn to recognize the mother's voice, don't they, and the parent's voice and things like that. It's really I mean, I can't remember what it is, but I'm fascinated.
Well, I remember when I was doing my PhD research. So I was looking at deep listening, and I was thinking about listening and the act of listening through our ears, and also then the deep listening, which isn't necessarily through the ears, but it's through all of the senses. When I am really listening to you, I'm drinking you in through my eyes and my ears, and if you were in the room with me, the smell, all of those things. But I think it's 14 weeks the ears start to develop, and I think they develop in 3 stages, but it's very early on in the development. So before we're seeing, really, we're hearing. And the thing that I always blows me away with sound is that because it's vibrational, even if we block our ears, or even if we're deaf, the sound still comes in, because we've got so much fluid in our bodies, and fluid is moved by vibrational frequency. So I did a whole experiment with cymatics, where you blow different frequencies onto sand or salt, and it creates different patterns. It's like, well, we're made of matter, and sound is going to be impacting us. So even if it doesn't make any sense to it, even if we don't understand it, even if there are no words, it's like just on a basic level of the frequency, it touches us. And so really, I think as babies, we're formed in that sound world of the sound and the feeling of our mother's heartbeat, and then these voices that come through, and the resonance of that. So like, as I'm describing it, I'm like, oh, it's so, like, I feel it's so rich, that world of sound, not thinking, no meaning making, just being in sound.
Yes.
Just that world of being bathed in sound. So can you talk a little bit about this lullaby project that you've been doing? So I know it's run by Live Music Now, South Wales, and I think they've had some work in England as well. And I know in Wales they've just got an award of £70,000 to be able to develop the work, which is fantastic. And it's a beautiful project. So maybe just talk a little bit about what your role is in that, and what you see happening when parents or mums are working with babies and sound and songs.
Yes, well, this is it's such a lovely project to be involved with, and it's right in the right moment of my life to be doing this as well, as a new mum. But it's a project that started in New York, in Carnegie Hall, where they were linking professional musicians up with, I think originally very young mums, first-time mums, to help them connect with their babies, perhaps even unborn at that stage, you know, to try and sort of get used to the idea that they were going to be massive changes, and by helping them write a lullaby for their baby. There's a whole process involved. There's a little booklet that we follow. You write a letter to your baby, and then from that letter you pull out words and phrases, and then the professional musicians will work with the mothers to put it into a song, some sort of structure and melody and chords. And then by the end of the project, we record the lullabies, so they have something to keep forever and ever, and also perform them, or share them. I think share is a better word than perform. And I'm on my 4th project now in Wales, and it is one of the most rewarding, gorgeous, joyous projects that I've ever worked on. We have a small group of 8 mums, and at the start they come in, and most of them usually have no musical experience, and are quite against singing. You know, they believe they can't sing, and oh no, I'm not doing that. But pretty much by the end, I'd say about 80 or 90% of them are not only singing their lullabies, they stand up in front of a room full of people and share their lullabies. You know, there's this huge transformation that happens in just 7 weeks. They grow in confidence so much. And you know, there's all these other things about the bond with their babies becomes stronger, and there's so many benefits for the baby and for the mum, and it's just it's very emotional. I mean, there's usually tears, you know. It's very emotional, because I think songwriting unlocks something that nothing else can, maybe. You know, just talking about it is really good, and that's a huge part of the process of writing these songs. You know, we have lots of conversations, and sort of maybe revisiting some difficult times during the birth and the pregnancy as well. Some mothers do find it too much, and can't continue with it, you know, because it's hugely emotional. But for those who are able to sort of like go through with it, because it seems so, you know, you think of a lullaby, you think of a very simple little song, throwaway song, you know, but when you make it personal, it becomes this hugely powerful thing. And that self-expression element of getting over the birth shock. I was listening to one of your speakers it really resonated with me about the three things that you need to get over that shock of becoming a mother for the first time. And connection, she said, was one, which obviously in these lullaby groups there's a lot of connection with other mums in the same experience. Self-expression, so writing your own personal lullaby to your baby, and then rest. And I mean, we work quite hard in these groups actually. It was, but rest is really important, as we know. But I think self-expression might be something that a lot of people find difficult to tap into if you're not involved in creative practices. So we help with that process, basically.
Yeah, beautiful. My brain is going so many places as I'm hearing your speaking, and I'm like, oh yeah. Two things come to mind, maybe just to reflect on, which is one, you talked about the baby bonding, and with singing in particular. There was a great study done in University College London a little while ago by Daisy Fancourt and her team, and they worked with new mums, and so they had a sort of a group who just met together once a week as a social group with the babies, and then another group who met together and sang. So they were led with the singing. And I think that the program was just 8 weeks or 10 weeks, so it's quite short, but the impact and the lowering of things like postnatal depression was really significant, because it increases the hormone oxytocin, which is the bonding one. And it's really important, because I think there is this idea that, oh, baby's born and all of a sudden the mum's just adores the baby and it's all love and it's all, oh, it's just bliss and it's just all cotton wool. And actually for most of us, that's not the case. Even if there is an expansion of love and connection, there's also pain and, you know, healing and like, who am I? There's, you know, it's so complex. But there's something about the singing specifically of all of the kinds of expression that really helps this rewiring, I guess, and healing both in mum, but also then extending that in the connection with the baby, which I love.
Yeah, it's someone commented when I released my song last week, having children is the biggest contradiction of my life. It's like the worst and the best thing to happen all at once. You know, I just like I can relate, you know, it's amazing, but it's so difficult as well. And that contradiction is sort of, yeah, it's really hard to express, really, you know. And I think maybe we're a bit fearful of admitting the difficulties, you know, when there's so much love and they're so gorgeous, and you know, you should be pleased and full of love, you know.
So maybe we'll go into that. I would like to come back maybe towards the end of our conversation and just talk a bit about anyone who's listening, who's like would like to express something, but they don't even know where to start. So let's come back to that at the end and maybe just dive in a little bit to the difficulties, really. And I think sometimes when we hear other people giving words to an experience, which in our own experience might not have words, or we don't know how to communicate, or we don't have anyone to communicate to. And if we're not journaling and we're not writing or creating art or doing something to express that, you know, that can stay inside and it can be kind of chaotic and it can be unclear. And sometimes then when you hear two people having a conversation, it's like, oh, I recognize something of my own experience in what you're saying. So I'm hoping that as we weave our own experiences together, that will resonate for other people and just help to give some kind of clarity. Sometimes I think when there's more clarity, which comes through the wording of a process or like articulating something, then I don't know, it just takes some of the charge out or something like that. It's like, oh, okay, it's not all me then. Oh, I can see that it's part of my experience and I'm not so identified with it. Something like it gives us more space.
Yes, it's like brain dumping, isn't it? Getting out of your head onto the paper, and you can see it, and it's not spinning around in your head. Because I think I've learnt to label some of the feelings. I think labeling a feeling is really useful, because once we know and recognize what it is, we can then find ways to help ourselves, isn't it? And I think I have had a bit of sort of postnatal anxiety, I think, recently. I've just had my second, and that anxiety and the brain just whirring, spinning, so much going on, my nervous system on overdrive, but getting it out onto paper, seeing it written down, just sort of, yeah, it gets us out of our head, isn't it? That's I found that really useful, you know.
So in your song, I mean, your chorus, the repeat is, I'm exhausted and I'm broken, exhausted and I'm broke, I'm exhausted and I'm broken, get off my tits. That's a kind of I need a solution here to this constant state of exhaustion and brokenness. Can you talk a little bit more about the experience of what that was like, or like what were you experiencing in either postpartum period, because you've got two children now? What's that like for you?
Well, I know. I mean, I laugh there because there's an element of humour here as well as it being quite dark as well. But those words, broken, I actually, that came from a conversation with another new mum at the time when this song was written after the birth of my first, so these were all very new experiences. And I just, you know, it through speaking with her, and she'd been speaking to another mum, she said, oh, so and so said she feels broken. I was just like, broken, that is what it is. You know, I'm always listening. You know, you were talking about deep listening. I'm always listening to myself and what other people have to say, and sometimes things really like that, just that word broken, I just like, that is what it is. That's how I feel, you know, broken. And you know, your body has gone through this huge transformation, being stretched and pulled to pieces, and then you've got to try and get over it, but you're looking after this other tiny little human as well, and it's really hard to be able to get over that whilst keeping someone else alive. You know, suddenly you're not the priority, and getting over that is not the priority, is it? You're just trying to keep this little thing alive, you know. And you know, people talk about survival mode. Oh my goodness me, that was just like, that's what it was, you know. And I was just not expecting, I mean, I was lucky in some respects. I've got a younger sister who had already had a baby, and she is quite blunt and very honest. And she pre-warned me, you know. But it's like, I've heard other people talk about sort of this being deceived by society. You know, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing, so cute and gorgeous and so much love. And then, but it's like, people don't tell you this other side, you know. I only got that from my sister, and I thought, if only I'd gone to antenatal classes, and you know, I think maybe the feeling, the emotion, people tell you, oh, you know, it's really tough, it's changed your life, nothing's going to prepare you for it, you're going to be exhausted. But I think by putting it into song and adding melody, or you know, instruments and stuff, I wanted to put the emotion of that as well, you know. I think there's something about just the words alone. I mean, it's quite horrific. One friend of mine who's expecting her first messaged me saying, "Oh, I'm really scared now after hearing that song," and I really hope I don't scare people, you know, because it is amazing as well. But I think I wanted to prepare people really more than anything. My sister prepared me with her openness and bluntness, and I feel like this song in a way is there to prepare people, you know, perhaps.
Well, and it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think I had the same thing before my first one, the first one in particular, or I think a particular traumatic experience, something like that. It just seems to be like, oh, but nobody told me about this. I definitely had that in my head as well. And then I did have a very wise friend who said, but would you have listened? And I just thought, oh,
Yes.
no, I wouldn't have. But because something about people saying words to me about an experience that I've never had, I couldn't relate it to anything. If somebody said you're going to be exhausted, I had no idea. I couldn't understand what that meant until I was having the experience and going, that's what they meant, you know. And we delete things because we don't want to think about that in a way, you know. We want to focus on feeling good and feeling well and feeling strong, or whatever, feeling peaceful. And I think then life happens and things change, and then we have to learn how to be able to feel that feeling when it's happening, but knowing that it just feels like it's a real growing up, that we're not trying to protect people from an experience. So when you were saying preparing, that's how I'm relating to it. Is like, yeah, let's not just say it's one thing. If we're going to say it's something, let's say it's everything. And also you don't know what any of it's going to be like until you're there. And for me, that's probably the really key bit, is that in our lives, and I don't know if this is particularly true for young girls, we play houses, we play mothers, we play babies, you know, we're doing that from a very young age. And there's a kind of a sense of, we know how life is going to be, and we know how to be in charge, and we know how to do this. And then when it happens and it's not the way we've been playing it in our heads, it's like, what? I feel deceived, because, you know, I knew how it was going to be, and it's not like that. And for me, in my own experience, that was like, it was the kind of the crush, the cut, the thing that ripped me open on an identity level. But also over the years, it's like, that is the moment of growing up, really, of going, actually, life is not like the way we have it in our heads it's going to be, and the way we've been practicing it and the playing it. It's like, at some point, you know, we realize life happens and we have very little control over it, really, but that we can totally be okay with that as well. Like, we don't have to be defeated, crushed, you know, annihilated by not knowing that there's something else in us that's, I don't know, bigger, greater. And I feel my heart as I'm saying it, it's like, you know, we can hold it all, like we can process it all, we can come through it all, something like that. But there is this moment where my world, certainly, of how I thought the world worked, just cracked open. It's like, it's not like that. It's like, what?
Absolutely. It changes everything, your outlook on life, everything. But it's the biggest, you learn so much about yourself and the world. It's the biggest lesson you will ever have. And you learn, I mean, I feel like I've had two wake-up calls about life. One was when I lost my father in 2014, and the other was when I became a mother. And they're really useful, I think, these wake-up calls, because you learn to live your life when you have these, you know. When my father was dying, he was telling me, you need to understand death in order to live your life. Which was, he told me this on his deathbed. He only had weeks left, you know, and it's always stuck with me. And you realize how fragile life is and how short it is. And then, you know, once I got over the grief of that, or, you know, you don't get over it, but you've learned to live with it and life moves on, you sort of forget a little bit. And then, whoa, it all happened again when I became a mother again. I was just like, time just goes so quickly. My relationship with time, that I've been trying to process that as well through song. That's like a huge thing. But they teach us so much, children, and you can squeeze so much more from life once you've had children. You feel more, pain, more joy, everything, all the emotions are heightened, and you really realize it crystallizes what is important. And because your time is so short, and you're, as a mother, as a parent, your time is no longer your own. You really learn to focus on where to concentrate your efforts and what you really want to do from life. So And
as I hear you describing it, I just feel a real sense of the preciousness, how precious the baby is, how precious our bodies are, how precious this relationship with time is. And those moments of death and birth, really the beginning and the end of coming into the world, of when we come close to those things, of how how much closer we are to our own being. There's nothing to work out. We can make meaning of stuff, and we can create stories about things as a way of understanding things, and yet really we're just there, two human beings, and one getting ready to leave, and one probably not wanting him to leave, and then one arriving in, and one not being ready for the coming in either. It's like, wow, these kind of ruptures. And I also hear, though, it's about relationship. It's really about, it's you and the other, whichever other it might be. And it's, I feel really full, like in my heart and in myself when I'm thinking about that, as I hear you describing it. Being full of life, really, knowing what that feels. And it's the feeling, and that's what's in the song, isn't it? It's like, it's not just words, the music that goes with the singing, and the lyrics are describing an experience, but the music is really what goes, here it all is. Here it all is.
Well, I worked with an amazing musician and friend of mine, Ethan Williams, on the arrangements, because I am a singer songwriter and a fiddle player, so I'm always sort of the top line. I'm not brilliant at sort of all the vertical bits of music, the chords and harmony and things like that, but basically he gave a few instructions to a wonderful group of horn players, 2 saxophonists and a trumpeter, and just build in intensity, basically, was the instruction throughout the piece. And it gets more and more sort of chaotic and sort of dissonant and wild and messy, and all these words that it's trying to convey those emotions without words in the background. I mean, one reviewer described it as horrible music, which I count that as a compliment, really, because it's not meant to be easy listening.
Great. And is it in a way that's what you're giving voice to, is those parts of the experience of, particularly it's like the postpartum body as well, because it's not just becoming a parent, that's one part of it, but it's also the body that's been ripped open, the breasts that are leaking or hard or bleeding, it's all of that as well. It is horrible and messy sometimes. It really is.
I mean, the hair loss, no one told me about the hair loss. I had mother's thumb. Like, I didn't even know.
What is mother's thumb? I don't know this.
It's not everyone gets this, but I was on a breastfeeding group, and I thought, I'm going to have to tell someone, because I was in agony. So the tendons along here on your thumb, from holding it's sort of like a what's it called? Almost like a repetitive strain injury from holding the baby so much. It become, the tendons in your thumb here become inflamed, and it is excruciating. I couldn't hold a pen long enough to write a shopping list, like, so I couldn't write. I the words I was writing was all in voice notes on my phone. I couldn't write them down. That was horrible, not to be able to hold a pen, even like wiping my bum, like the angle of that, like I couldn't do it. It was agony, excruciating. And I thought, so I went to see a physio about it, and they get Dequarians or something. Dequarians, it's a thing, but it's called mother's thumb, and it's I think it's from lifting babies. We're using muscles that we're not used to using so much. And I did a bit of research just online about it, and apparently it's more of a modern day issue because um, before the days of washing machines and dishwashers and things like that, women's hands were stronger. Apparently, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if it's true. I haven't done it's. I just read an article where women's hands were stronger from doing all these housework chores, so they wouldn't get that. But I thought, is it just me? But again, my sister had it, so she told. And then once I put it on this group, quite a lot of women were like, oh my gosh, I've got this, but it seems so insignificant compared to everything else you're trying to deal with. But if you can't work with people and write a shopping list, I mean, that's has quite an effect on your day-to-day life, doesn't it? So I want to just put it in a song because like no one talks about it,
Yeah, I've never heard it. And it's interesting though. I think that there are certain things about sort of experience that might not be known about, because I just feel like sometimes women's experience is made so small. It's like it's the whole thing of even just having a baby. Yeah, just get on with it. Just get on with it. It's like, oh my god, but like it's massive. Yeah. But women have been doing it for thousands of years. It's like, oh my god. No, really. And so maybe towards the end of this now, we can come back into that point then of, how do people find ways to begin to express their experience? So for me, I have always written, I've always had a journal since I was very young. So for me, that's always the way. But I did notice after my second baby, I didn't write in my journal for about 3 weeks because I was giving myself an incredibly hard time in my head for not doing it well enough, for not doing the breath well enough. It happened in the birth. I could hear that voice. It was very loud. And I just couldn't bear to write because I thought it's all going to come pouring out. And I was ashamed, really. I was ashamed to be having these thoughts in my own head about myself. And I just couldn't. So I found the only time I could get a break from it is going in a bath. And my friend brought me this sort of packet of marigold calendula flowers, and I would put those in the bath with me, and I would have maybe half an hour every day where my head would just be quieter, or when I was feeding the baby. That was it. That was my respite. So I didn't write for about 3 weeks. But then when I came to writing, I got really interested in narrative songs. So I'm from Ireland, and singing is also, it's such a big part of the culture, and songs that tell stories. So these kind of long narrative forms. So I wrote a long song for my second son. And it was great because it kind of mapped out the journey a little bit. There's a little bit of chronology there, but also it was the key moments for me that I want to remember from the birth. And he was only maybe 3 or 4, and I was talking with him, and I was saying, and I wrote a song when you were born. It's called A Song for Oscar. And he was like, oh, and I sang it to him, and he was very young, and he just was kind of had very gentle tears. And, he couldn't even understand the full thing, but whatever we shared between us, in that sharing of an experience, because he also was having an experience, although less conscious in some ways than me. He was having an experience of being born while I was giving birth. So I wonder if you have got any sort of tips for people of how people might just start to explore their experience, whether it's through writing or something else. How do you start with your project? What do you start with?
Well, I mean, the way we run it with the Lullaby Project is by writing a little story, a memory down. I mean, writing the birth story, if you don't know where to begin, just writing the facts, isn't it? You don't have to think creatively if that sort of scares you. Just writing down the facts, and then the next stage we do is this letter that you could read maybe when they're older, when they can understand. Writing can be difficult because of course we don't have the use of our hands a lot. That's what I found. So I just used my phone, and I would speak into my phone all the time, like fragments, little loads of short little recordings, 10-20 seconds worth, and then I'd wait for a time to piece them together into some sort of structure that made sense when it came to the song. But you know, dancing, even dancing with your baby. I listened to a fascinating conversation about the benefits of that, and moving with someone you is the start of where we build trust in someone. So trust in the parent, I suppose, or any sort of caregiver at the start. And those feelings then develop into empathy and things like that as we grow up. So, you know, even something as simple as that, putting on your favorite bit of music and getting lost in that, you know, there's no pressure on you to create something new. Just sort of dancing, feeling the music, being in that moment with your baby. And there's huge benefits in that. And you know, I think I think tapping into that form of self-expression, whatever you feel most easy to do, you know, don't put any huge expectations on yourself. You're just trying to process everything, aren't you? So, but just baby steps, isn't it? Just saying how you're feeling, what are you doing, you know? And do you know, when I work on this lullaby project with people who haven't got a background in sort of as creative practitioners or whatever, the words that these mothers come up with are so heartfelt and profound. It's amazing reading them. I feel emotional listen, you know, just thinking about what they come up with. Just try and be as honest as you can with your feelings, and just get it out there in some way, because I think it'll make you feel better. But not only that, you might have something that can be passed on and that will last forever. You know, the song you talk about to your son, that you wrote for your son, this is what I love about music and documenting it in some way, written down. It's alive in the moment when you sing it. But if you record it as well and have it written down, it'll last forever. Your son will be able to sing that to his children, and they might sing it to their children. You've created something that's gonna live way longer than you will, and that's why I'm such an advocate for sort of songwriting and these lullaby writings, because they are incredible. It's about the moment, but it's about forever and generations to come as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I know we could go on.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, and it's not just one set, and it's how to bring in the complexity of the experience and all. I hope that people listening will, in their brains, go, oh, I need some paper, I need to put on some music. It's like, just take the energy, whatever's come up. And sometimes when we feel a bit triggered emotionally, we might have emotions coming up listening to come. It's like, just move your body, and the emotions will process naturally. Do some deep breathing, and the emotions will pass naturally. If we don't move them, then we can go into our heads, and that's where we kind of get things a bit stuck in the body and go into overthinking. So really encourage anybody who is listening and feeling what I'm feeling, just little bubbling up, is like, just find a way right now to express it.
Get a pen, get a paper, or an envelope, you know, anything's sort of around you. Get it, absolutely move your body. Breathe, jump 5 jumps.
Great. Thank you so much, Angharad.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. I've really enjoyed our conversation.